Welcome to another edition of the 1% Better podcast with your host, Rob O'Donoghue.
Hi folks, welcome to another 1% Better episode. By the time this comes out, I think we might be somewhere in the 190 category, which is meaningful and meaningless, probably both things, depend on who you are. But this week I'm delighted to be talking with Danielle Grant of Your Mindset Mentor, and the tagline is where peak performance meets consciousness. All things I really want to dive into: mindset, peak performance, consciousness, and soul alignment is somewhere in there as well. So Danielle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rob. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so grateful to be on the show today.
Delighted to have you. And I was admiring your office in the background there, Audrey Hepburn inspiring you for the next, 50 minutes or so.
Yeah, exactly. She's my inspiration today.
Very good. Very good. So I always like to know a little bit about the person I'm talking to. And when I was doing my research on you, you're from a place I'm going to butcher the name, but it's Keloan. I don't know.
Oh, so close. Kelowna. It's called Kelowna.
Oh, God, I got it wrong altogether. So
no, you're close.
In British Columbia, is it?
That's right, in Canada, yeah.
Right. And what side of Canada is that? Give me some geography lesson here.
Yeah, you bet. So we're the West Coast. We're about 3.5 hours outside of Vancouver.
Okay. So you're probably eight hours difference with me at the moment, is it?
I am, yeah. It's the middle of my day right now. It's the evening for you, middle of the day over here.
Yeah, very good, very good. So great to talk to you. I don't know that area at all. Are you from there originally? Is that where you grew up? Is there maybe a little bit of background for listeners?
Yeah, I grew up here, lived here for 19 years, and then I left for 10 years. It's a little bit of a smaller town. So I, being a young person, wanted to get out, and I've been back now home for 3 years. So it's been great to be back home, but this is home.
Okay. And the C word that we all know very well at the moment, that is globally, maybe a different C word, but coronavirus. How is that in your region, in your area at the moment?
You know what? Up until yesterday, it was pretty good. We've been, everyone's pretty mindful here, but we had a little outbreak at one of our schools. So That was the first mishap we've had so far, but it's been pretty good here otherwise.
Okay. I was reading during the week, someplace in Canada actually has zero coronavirus, and it had never had a case. Very kind of remote sort of region. I don't know, it was on the news, but in Ireland, just as we speak today, whatever date it is, the 22nd, we've just gone back into lockdown number 2 for the next 6 weeks, which is kind of a hardcore lockdown. Doesn't feel as bad as the first one, even though it's pretty much the same. It's just you kind of get used to it, right? And that's probably some of the things we talk about today with our mindset and how we can adjust. So interesting question that I like to throw out there. What's the last thing you've learned that has made a difference to you? What jumps into mind when I ask that?
Well, recently this summer, I decided to become a paragliding pilot. And so I had to learn how to become a paragliding pilot. And what I learned through that experience that I had known, but was really brought to the forefront to me, was the people that show up and put the time in are the people that get better. And it's not a matter of being a certain type of person or having a certain type of equipment. It really comes down to the people that show up and put the time in are the people that become better pilots. And I never really thought about that because it's kind of the same thing in business, but it just reminded me that it does not matter what you're doing in life. If you show up consistently, you will improve, you will end up at the top, and you will become one of the best.
Mm-hmm. Good lesson. Just on that, I presume you had to know how to paraglide before you could become an instructor, right?
Oh, sorry. I wasn't becoming an instructor. I was becoming a paragliding pilot. I had no previous experience before, and I just went for it.
Okay. Wow. So no fear? Was it something that was something you've always wanted to do, or what was the kind of trigger to say go for it?
The irony in this is I've never really wanted to paraglide. I've never really been drawn to it. I like to do adrenaline sports. I like to skydive, stuff like that, but never paragliding. And then this last year, I really made a decision to move through fear and to stop fear within my mindset. Being a mindset mentor, I love to challenge that stuff. So I was always putting myself in fearful positions. And I had spent a lot of time in that mindset. So when the opportunity came for me to maybe paraglide, it wasn't necessarily, hey, I want to do this. It was more this calling of hey, let's see how far you've moved beyond that fear you're trying to move. And so that's actually what inspired me to do it. Later, I learned that it was something I always wanted to, went through the journey. But it was really more to identify if I had been able to move through fear in my mindset, which I actually have been, and that was able to prove that to me. So it was amazing.
Very, very good. So talk to me about your own journey to where you're at now. From reading, you've gone around different paths and down different roads, I presume, and come back up those roads and gone down other ones. So yeah, give me a bit of a story, a background on how you got to where you got to now.
I love this story because my story definitely is a couple wrong turns, or not wrong turns, but turns that should have been right instead of lefts. When I was 15 years old, I grew up in an environment that was very loving. We always were in sports and academics, but I was raised against a sister who excelled at everything. And so I had created this reality for myself that was really dark and deep. And I started to have suicidal thoughts. And so at 15, I wanted to take my life. And thankfully, a teacher had identified something wasn't right, contacted my mom, who then I ended up at the psychiatric ward for 5 days. And that was the first time in my life I'd really asked myself a question of like, why did I believe that to be true? Why did I believe my life was worth giving up? And I started to hear all of these reasons why I thought it wasn't worth giving up. And that's what really inspired me to become curious about mindset and attachment to thought more specifically. And I quietly, no one really knew about that experience in my family even. I quietly went on in life, went into the corporate world, and was also a college dropout. And so I was someone who was exploring mindset, not only from being in a depressive state, but also in a place where people told you can never be anything if you didn't have a degree. And I went on for about 10 years studying personal development, climbing up corporate ladders, excelling in life, really navigating my own mindset. Again, not saying anything to anybody. And then about 8 years ago, I found myself in Thailand becoming curious about Buddhism. And that was the first time I'd really become curious about Buddhism itself. And I have spent basically the last 8 years, close to 9 years, studying Buddhism with Buddhist monks and getting to know a really understanding attachment to thought from their perspective. And it's now been 18 years in total that I've been on this journey of understanding personal development and mindset, ego, conscious, subconscious, all of it. And I'm obsessed with it. This is what I'm extremely passionate about. This is clearly what I'm here to do. 3 years ago, the corporate world kicked me out, which I was grateful for. And I haven't looked back ever since. I've had this business for 3 years now, Your Mindset Mentor. So that's kind of the Coles Note quick version on me and how I got here.
Very good. I'll dig into some of the parts of that, if that's okay, just to kind of, unravel some of it. When you said you were 15 and you had the suicidal thoughts, like, was that something that you noticed building up, that comparison, that kind of, loggerheads with your sister, even though that was probably all in your own head in many ways? What was the build up like, and what was the trigger point then, do you think, that kind of caused the attempt?
Yeah, so it was building up for about years. And when I first kind of came into this state and was living within these stories and becoming more of my reality, my parents thought I needed to go see a counselor. And so I did the whole counseling thing, went through that route. They never really identified to me that that's what was going on. They never addressed it. They never talked to me about that I was creating these stories. So I spent years, about 3 years in total, in counselor sessions and in family counseling, trying to correct this problem. And I never really knew what was going on. I didn't understand. I was just this depressive person. That's what I'd attached to. But the thing that triggered it for me was that my parents were getting a divorce. My mom came home one day and said, "I'm leaving your dad." And my sister freaked out. And it was a very intense situation. And it made me realize in that moment that I had nothing to live for, because the reality that I thought I was living for was about to be broken. And that was the trigger point for me, and the behavior that my sister exuded that caused me to want to basically say, this is it. I have nothing worth living for now. It's interesting to hear the events, I suppose, that brought it up. And as soon as you tried and it didn't work, luckily, because you're obviously here now, was there a release after that, or did you feel different after that attempt? And you said you were in hospital for 5 days, but just even how things changed just around that, how quickly things changed. In the moment that it was happening, I didn't feel any different. And I think that's something a lot of people think will happen. It took me some time of being in that state of by myself and only listening to my thoughts, and now having this conscious question of where. Once I started to explore that question of why did I believe, and I started to hear all the reasons why, I started to feel a little bit more like I had an answer that I was looking for. And that's what caused me to feel like, okay, I am worth it. And there was something else going on and I didn't see it. And that was the moment for me that made everything change.
Okay. And afterwards, you said we kind of finished school and went and dropped out in college. Just curious, was that a course that you decided that you wanted to do just for the sake of doing it? I'm asking because I dropped out of college as well, and it was, looking back, one of the best things that I ever did in so many ways. But what I really wanted to do, I didn't get originally in college, so I did something else. And I'm kind of really doing what I want to do now, although it took me about 20 years to kind of get there, sort of thing. So just interested on, did you settle for a different option? Would you have done it differently?
I never wanted to go to post-secondary. It was something that everyone else wanted for me. And so when I expressed I didn't want to do that, I actually wanted to become a motivational speaker. That's what I really wanted to do, because I had this desire all along. And my personal life experience was allowing me into that space. And everyone told me I couldn't do it. So I went to what everyone told me. And within my first semester, I was like, this is ridiculous. This is not for me. I don't learn in this environment. I don't want to be here. This is for everyone else but me. And if my family disowns me, then they disown me. That's on them. And I came home, I told them, and within a month and a half, I packed my stuff up and moved out of town to start my young adulthood life.
Mm-hmm. What were you doing in college? What was it that you were studying?
I was studying business.
Okay. And that wasn't doing it for you, for sure. So talk to me about some of the roles you took in corporate. You said you climbed up the ladder, again, similar from that perspective. But I think the cliche is, as you get up that ladder and look from different perspectives, you realize, there's nothing to see there. That really was what was motivating you. So, talk to me a little bit about that. And then I'm very interested in hearing about, diving into the Buddhism area.
Yeah, I love the way that you position that. When you get to different levels or perspectives, you start to see that it's not what you thought it was, which is so very true. So my corporate world, I've always excelled. I started at a young age in management, started when I was 17 as a key holder in a skateboard company in our mall here. And I ascended up to be the general manager within 6 months. And that was when I was 18 by that time. And then I moved into the corporate world. I worked in sales and marketing for a couple of years, excelling in those roles. And then I worked in the car industry. And the car industry is what changed it for me. The car industry was something that I never thought I would work in, never thought anything positive about it. But when the opportunity presented itself, it was to sell luxury cars. And that was something that appealed to me because I was from the corporate world. I wanted the picket fence. I wanted the nice cars. I wanted all the money. So to me, that seemed like I was getting closer to that goal that I thought I wanted. But that was the one that when I got there, I realized just what it was really like. I realized that money didn't buy happiness. I realized that people were going broke trying to pay for these expensive cars. I realized that most people in their marriages, even though they were rich, were very unhappy. And that was the really big turning point for me to realize, like, hey, I actually am chasing something that isn't for me. It never was for me. This is what society wants. I've never been that person. I don't want to be that person. I bought the luxury car. I didn't feel any better about myself. And from that point, I ended up kind of working a little bit more in the corporate world. I worked for one of my customers as her personal assistant, which was a really fantastic job because it offered me business experience at a high level. And then from there, I went back to the car industry for 1 year in the finance office. And that was it. That was when I had really kind of made a decision that year. Within the next year, this is all I'm going to do. I'm going to go become an entrepreneur. I don't know what that looks like. And then gratefully, I lost my job. From there, I've never looked back. But the turning point for me was selling cars and realizing that nothing is what I thought it was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. You do kind of need to go down those avenues and realize that, because it all looks great from afar, the grass is greener, but when you're actually there, there's no substitute for that, right? Because at least then it actually isn't what it's supposed to be, and your search kind of can go in a different direction. And I'm interested going in that direction. You said you got to Thailand. What brought you there? What was the draw to go there? Was it purposeful or was it just random?
I was 25 years old and I was wanting to party, and a bunch of us wanted to go travel. There was no intention behind it. I had no idea that trip was going to really be the next massive pivot in my life.
So tell me about it then. Tell me what was the journey there? Because you probably can't see behind me. There's a shelf there with a section of meditation and Buddhism books that I have kind of dived into over the last 5 or 6 years myself. Obviously, with the whole meditation and mindfulness mainstream, it's interesting. I talk to people and they get tense when you talk about meditation because they think it's another thing they have to do just to fit in or to find time to do that. And it's certainly not about that at all. But I've never spent time per se in Thailand kind of studying it and getting accustomed and really diving in. So I'd love to hear your journey through that.
Yeah. So what happened in Thailand was really the first time that I'd been exposed to Buddhist culture. I'd had Buddhist statues all over my house, and I wasn't really into it on that level, just on a surface level. But when I went to Thailand with my friends, I found myself really attracted to the temples and the energy, and I really felt the pull. And so it took us about 3 weeks before we went up to Chiang Mai, which is northern Thailand, and we started to explore some of the temples there. And that's what, as soon as I got in there, I started to just internally hear this voice saying, this is where you're supposed to be, and like pay attention and feel how you feel and really see what's going on. This is new to you. And I really felt whole. I felt like it was where I needed to be. And then when we left Thailand and I came back to Canada, that's when I started to really get into the Buddhism. I started to get more text. I started to get more context of it, started to dive more into it. And about a year went by, and then I decided to go to Bali. I said, okay, I want to do a solo trip to Bali. I really want to get into this. Now I'm really into it. I want to understand this. So I went to Bali on a solo trip, again, found out some temples, started talking to the Buddhist monks that were in there, and decided that when I got home to Canada, I needed to find a temple, because they're everywhere. People don't understand that. They're everywhere. I needed to find a temple where I could meet with a monk one-on-one and learn from him and ask questions. And so at the time I was living in Edmonton, Canada, and I seeked out a local temple, and gratefully there was one close by, and I started going there every Friday. They would do open sessions, and I could ask questions, and they would give me things to read. And that's when I started to really understand that this wasn't a religion. This wasn't, just another thing to do. This was a complete understanding of life to its truest and fullest capacity. And this was something that was very intriguing to me. And from that moment, I've never looked back, and I've become extremely obsessed with anything in the Buddhist culture. I've been reading stuff for, 5,000 years back, and really rooting it down into what it is, not a religion. It's a way of life. It's an understanding of life.
Mm-hmm. Did you dive into kind of retreats and long meditation sessions over days and things like that? Have you dipped into that?
I haven't gone to, there's a place locally here that does stuff like that, but I haven't put myself in a position in those environments. Have I put myself in those positions in my own environment? Absolutely. In fact, one of the ways I built this business was through meditation.
Right. Very, very interesting. Yeah, it's, there's, as you said, there's temples everywhere. Where I live in Cork, there's one about an hour and a half away, which has been there 30 years, and they're building a new one, which is fascinating. And a guy I actually interviewed on the show last year, just again last week, he's currently doing a run called the 3,100 mile race. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's in honor of this monk, Sri Chinmoy is the guy's name. He was based in the US for years, but he had set up a 3,100 mile race every year, and it's run around a half mile block in New York, and this year it's not happening in New York, it's actually happening in Austria and in Salzburg. But from diving into many different deep meditators over the last few years, from talking to them and seeing the similar sort of mindsets that come out of it. Exactly that, though. Mindset Mentor from Buddhism really helped shape your mindset, because if you think of mindset and a growth mindset, you might think of Carol Dweck's work. You're probably familiar with that. But just how mindset became the focal point of your business. Where did that come from? What influences brought that together? I'd love to hear a story and deep dive into that.
That's a really good question, especially because when we talk about mindset and growth mindset, that is the person that Carol Dweck is the person we typically associate to. When I was in the psychiatric ward at 15, and I started to ask that question of why did I believe that my life wasn't worth giving up, I started to hear all the different reasons. And when I heard all the different reasons, that's what allowed me to become curious of where have these been living the whole time? How are these all of a sudden here? What are they just this part of my brain? And that's what really piqued my interest. And that's where I started to understand that the mindset is different aspects. So there's the ego mindset, which is our human aspect. There's our subconscious mindset, which is part of our human aspect, but is rooted in our spiritual aspect. And then there's our conscious, which is obviously our higher self. And then there's our superconscious, which is infinite source intelligence. And that's what really started to become curious of hey, these mindsets live in different areas. These thoughts, these emotions, these beliefs live in different places. Where do they live? They're not in your brain. And that's when I started to look into the Buddhism started to answer that question for me, because it started to explain those different aspects of ourselves and within this human journey. And so I started to become really curious about specifically the ego, subconscious, and conscious, and understanding how they actually played in our life, what they look like, why society didn't talk about them. And that's really the journey of me bridging like personal development and bridging mindset, is understanding that part of Buddhism, which is the actual mindsets that we live within.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think, you said society doesn't talk about those? Why does it not address them? What do you think is the reason it doesn't go there?
Because they know how powerful the truth is. And there's many governments that have done tests in the 1940s, the Americans being one, that just actually recently this year during COVID quietly published the report publicly that in 1940, they did a study proving that humans were able to manipulate their beliefs, thoughts, and stories because they were energetic states and they had the ability to create their reality. And near the bottom of the report, it basically talked about how, in essence, in short form, this information can't get out and people can't know about this. And so that is why for a long time, our society, they're in control. We're monkeys, we're puppets of the marketing and the social and the media. And whoever was in charge of that knew, and they knew that we should not know that information. And so it's been termed new age information today, but it's not. It's the oldest age information we have.
And that's available now. Is there a name on that report, or just something that I'd be interested in reading?
If you look up Law of Attraction CIA 1940, I can't remember the exact title of it, you'll find it.
Okay, interesting.
I will send it to you, Rob. I do have a link for it.
Yeah, no, just fascinating to kind of read what was in it and why it was withheld, because obviously, it's fascinating. As you said, with the whole COVID scenario, people's heads are turned a little bit, and as you said, it can trickle out some other crazy information. Because I think as well earlier this year they released some footage of UFO type objects, and that was held for 20 years. And I think anyone that could Google that, it came out from an official government source that these are objects that there is no explanation for. There's probably lots of other things they're trickling out as well. So you mentioned becoming an entrepreneur 3 years ago and bringing in your learnings. It's funny, isn't it? Like from when you were 15, little did you realize that event was going to be the turning point and lead you along this path and give you that kind of confidence. And from talking to you, and I get a very strong sense of confidence and self-belief on that. Is that something you have to work on? Is that something that comes out through meditation, or how do you instill that in you?
That's a really good question. The confidence is something that you create internally. And if you have certain beliefs that allow you to stand in a confident state, then you can be confident. Have I been confident my whole life? Sure. Am I more confident now as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, because I had to be? Yes. How did I get there? Through affirmations and meditation, through visualizing myself being confident and showing up on calls like this, exuding confidence. Absolutely. That's how I did it.
Mm-hmm. And on days when you're feeling that negative self-talk coming in and questioning everything, what are your approaches or pivot points? How do you turn that around?
The first thing I do is I don't avoid it. I don't put it on my to-do list to journal out later. I deal with it right then and there. I grab a piece of paper and a pen, which for anyone listening, that is one of the most powerful things you can do, is put pen to paper to gain clarity on anything. And I simply ask myself, Danielle, what are you believing to be true right now? What are you believing to be true? And I'll list all the bullshit that I'm hearing in my mind, all the limitations, and then I'll look at it and say, why are you believing that to be true? Where does that come from? And it's always some underlying childhood belief around worthiness, or you're afraid, or judgment, or whatever it is. There's not very many of them. They're all the same. And then I ask myself, well, what do I want to believe to be more true? Well, what I want to believe to be more true is whatever the opposite of that situation is. And then what I do is I continually repeat that affirmation. I stand up, I get myself in a confident state while repeating that affirmation. So I'm actually changing my energetic state and my attachment to what I was attached to before. And then I start working on that thing. And now I'm in a new mental feedback loop of one that's supporting and guiding me of where I want to go.
Mm-hmm. So you're effectively changing state in a way, right? I've heard, I think it was Tony Robbins a while ago, if he's kind of having a funky day like that, go for a 5-minute rapid walk or do a bit of a run. You're just changing your physical state, which has an impact on your mental state and, neuro the neuroscience behind that was probably releasing, dopamine or serotonin or whatever other chemical that's coming out. So it's kind of flipping it around. So your approach of doing those tasks help with that. Is there anything else that you typically as go-tos or other things you do in your coaching or mentoring to help people get out of that?
Mindset's a real simple place, and people really want to overcomplicate it, and personal development as a whole is. And I don't normally recommend anything else, because the number one reason why people are stuck where they are is because they're holding on to a belief system. And the only way to move beyond a belief system is to see it. And the only way to see it is to down. And then you have the choice to change it. So we can do all the meditations and visualizing and do all that stuff. But ultimately, if you don't actually change the belief in the subconscious, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we are all guilty of having too many tools in the toolkit, right? And not using any of them appropriately. I actually, in my day job, recently did a survey with business leaders, and one of the pieces that came back is it's all about what habits, behaviors do you apply to make habits. And one of the lowest percentage response on one of the criteria was journaling. Like, very few people actually do it because it sounds too easy to do almost. Because it's not hard, sometimes you don't want to do it because it doesn't take that much effort, and there's kind of that sense of there couldn't be much value in that. But it's totally wrong, right? It is scientifically proven to change and make you feel better about whatever it is you're looking at.
Yeah, it's the only tool I really use is pen to paper. I mean, call it journaling, call it creative writing, call it whatever you want. It's just putting pen to paper. And most people don't journal more so that it's not easy, more because there's an internal stigma for themselves that they're above that, or that's for kids, or, it's for girls or whatever. So it's not even a matter of it being easy. It's their own internal perception.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. So talk to me about, we're kind of diving in. I did ask the question and probably asked a different one, but about your setting up the business and becoming an entrepreneur, just the process you went through that and how that, I suppose, came to pass, and how you kind of landed on the things you really wanted to kind of focus your business on.
Yeah, it's such a loaded question. When I got let go from my last corporate job, it was the day before my 29th birthday. And the next day, my mom phoned and said, "Happy birthday." And I said, "I don't have a job." And she freaked out like any mom would. But at the same time, she had just purchased a course teaching people how to leverage the online space. And at the same time, I was also starting to become aware that people were leveraging the online space to build profitable businesses. And so she gifted that to me. And that day I got started on the course. I started researching how people were learning how to leverage the online space. People were doing membership sites, courses, all this good stuff. So I went down that path and started to become what was going on. But what I landed on was actually an e-commerce store at the beginning. And for about 4 months, I built an e-commerce store. I was drop shipping out of China, and it was great. I enjoyed it. It was actually profitable, but it wasn't really impactful. It wasn't really like driving that purpose inside. And so I took about 2 months off to really ask myself, what am I here to do? Like, obviously, I want to be an entrepreneur. I've always wanted to be a motivational speaker. I've always been in a personal growth and mindset. I've always helped people. I've always been helping people with their personal problems because I have experience in it. And for 2 months, I actually listened to Gary Vaynerchuk every day, more so listening to him on how to create a strategy and what needed to be done and the kind of mindset I needed to actually be a successful entrepreneur. And in January of 2018, I basically decided I'm going to start a personal development company. I started actually helping high income achievers stop living paycheck to paycheck from coming out of the corporate world. That's something that I saw. And over making numerous pivots and aligning with what I want, I landed on Your Mindset Mentor, helping entrepreneurs with their mindset. But it was a long journey. It was a long process. And I had a little bit of a distorted mindset around thinking that my business and corporate experience would allow me to step into entrepreneurship successfully. But it didn't, because entrepreneurship is a whole new beast in a game and I had no experience in it. So that was a really steep learning curve of having to be an entrepreneur. And what I mean by that is working for myself, being accountable, actually taking action, getting dressed in the morning, showing up and doing work, like doing things that entrepreneurs need to do to move the business forward that corporate people don't do. That was the number one thing that I had to put my own mindset work behind, because I had to create this new behaviors and patterns for myself.
Was that the hardest and most uncomfortable thing to do in that journey, or what kind of, looking back, what was the real thing? Okay, this is really challenging my mindset here. I have to walk the walk. What were the kind of key obstacles or hurdles for you?
The first one was getting on video. It was very much in my head around video and judgment and what people were going to think. And so it took me a long time. But the way that I got over that was I decided to do 100 live streams in 100 days. And no problem. I've now done thousands of videos and it's no problem. But that's how I got over that one. One that I'm still in with now is actually worthiness. I'm still I'm still aligning with the worthiness that is me of the product that I'm offering. And so I'm not 100% behind it, but internally I'm getting there, which is the most important part.
It's definitely interesting about the video thing. And all of these things, I find when you nail it yourself and you become comfortable with it, you forget quickly how difficult it was. And then, it's easy then to kind of say, well, you see somebody else struggling with it, and it kind of brings you back to say, yeah, I remember now. It's that kind of curse of knowledge. When you know something so well, you don't think it was that everybody else should already know it. But I found even when I was kind of doing a lot more of this, I was doing 1 minute videos every week, you get into a momentum, and then when you stop, it's very hard to get back into it again, right? It's like running. If you haven't ran for about a month, when you go again, you feel like you had never done it before. So it is a momentum thing. I think it's important to kind of keep that going. Did you find that certainly with the streams, and if you're doing it for 100 days in a row, you have serious momentum?
You know what? I did see that, but one of the things I learned through that process that I'd never had awareness around so much before was just how much of a mindset that actually is. And so when I would stop producing videos for a couple months, and then I would have to get back to producing videos, I didn't allow my mindset to go to a place of this is difficult, or I'm lacking momentum, or this is hard. I knew that it was already there to begin with. So I didn't start there. I decided to create a new mindset. Today's a great day to create a video. I'm so looking forward to getting my momentum back. I can't wait to create this video right now. And I would start to produce those mindsets before I would create the video. So I learned how to eliminate that stage really quick. And I think a lot of people need to learn how to do that, because it's like you use the running analogy. The only reason why it's difficult is because you currently are in a feedback loop that believes that you stopped and now you got to get back. And the way to get back is hard work and effort. So it produces those mindsets. But you can change those. Those aren't real mindsets. They're just stories that we believe.
And with that example, did you go back to writing down what was going through it again? You just used that process, and then it's kind of flipped into it.
I still use that process today. I do not stop that process. That's the number one reason that's allowed me to continue to grow and pivot and move through the uncomfortable part of my business, is that I continually journal out my day-to-day problems that I have internally.
Mm-hmm. And as you were pivoting to where you're at now, you look back, what were the biggest mistakes you made? You think that, geez, if I had my time over again, I would have done this a little bit differently?
That's a really good question. One thing I want to say before that is, one of the things you previously said was sometimes we forget where we were. One of the things Matthew McConaughey said one time in a thing was, always remember, or not Matthew McConaughey. One thing that The Rock said in a video once was, always remember where you came from. And that stuck with me, and I wrote it on a piece of paper. And so every couple of months, I'll actually stop and remind myself, like, hey, remember how hard it was? Remember how difficult it was? And so I just wanted to say that to those of you that are listening. Like, it's important to do that. But to the question you asked in terms of lessons, there's 2 lessons that I really have learned from there. Number one is, I had this perception that I could build this business faster than anyone else, because everyone online was talking about these fast, get rich quick businesses. And so my mindset had kind of fallen into that place a little bit. And I realized that was the wrong mindset, and it was actually holding me back from getting growth faster at the beginning, because I was so mad that I wasn't getting the fast results, instead of just realizing it was a long game. When I started to really adapt this mindset of it being a long game, which Gary Vaynerchuk talks about all the time, I started looking at things differently. I didn't get mad when things didn't work out. I was able to pivot faster. So that was a big lesson that I learned. The second lesson that I learned is just how important it is as an entrepreneur that you are in alignment with yourself, because most entrepreneurs are in alignment with what everything everyone else is telling them to do. And that's not true to them. And then it creates resistance, and it's not fun for anybody. But when you're in alignment with yourself, and your beliefs are in alignment with yourself, your money story is in alignment with yourself, all of that's in alignment with you, everything in your business becomes flow and ease. And if more entrepreneurs would get into that state, they would move their business faster, they would scale faster, they'd make more money faster, and they'd have way less headaches. But most people miss that step. And so those are 2 lessons that I learned right away, and I still will continue to learn.
Mm-hmm. So the question then is, and not to give away all your secrets, right, but just to help some people listening, and it's the common challenge is, you're living somebody else's dream, right, but how do I find what my dream is, or how do I get that alignment with myself of what my values are? And a lot of the coaching I do is around people struggling as to whether to quit this job and start that job or do that, and ultimately they're not figuring out what's important to them. So what's your approach to kind of tap into that or help people to do that you've obviously applied to yourself, I presume?
And you know what? I give all my secrets away for free. If anyone wants to follow any of my content, I give it all away for free because most people won't even act on it anyway. So if someone wants to listen to this and act on it, amazing. But it's really simple. It's the same process I gave you before. And I call it the 3-step mindset framework, which were those 3 questions I journal out. And what I do is I get them to continually do it. So we'll do it one day, 3 days later, we'll do the same exercise. 5 days later, we'll do the same exercise. And every time you do the same exercise, asking those same questions over and over again, you get a little bit deeper in the subconscious that much more, tapped into the conscious that much more. And the more you do it, the more you start to see how you were very surface level to begin with. You were unsure. You didn't know what you wanted to do. You didn't know what direction to go. But the more you go through the same questions over and over again, the more you get clear, the more you gain consciousness, the more you see it for what it is, the more you start to get the truth. And so it's not about doing a big process. It's about doing the same process over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Repeating the cycle. And do you find some people get to that promised state or figuring that out faster than others? Do you ever give people sometimes people lose heart, right? So if you say, well, this is going to take 10 weeks, people might get a bit, lose the momentum or lose the will. So if you kind of give them in 2 weeks' time, you're going to have a lot clearer perspective. What's your kind of approach to ensure there's, and again, this is tapping into dopamine and the reward system of keeping people motivated to get there. What's your approach for that?
Really, that's a really good question, Rob. And one of the things that I tell people all the time is mindset work actually is very quick. And I don't like to give people timeframes because people attach them so aggressively. But when you work in mindset and when you actually start working in the things that'll give you truth, you can get answers very quickly. And once someone sees an answer to something that they've been looking for a very long time very quickly, they have a lot of trust immediately. And there's that conscious voice inside that's saying, yeah, let's keep going. Let's keep finding that. So that instills the trust in them because they've started to align with their higher self. They've started to align with the conscious energy. And so when I tell people, how fast can you see a result? It's very fast. And I actually had a client today who I was working with, and that was one of the questions he asked me when we first started working together. Well, how fast are you going to help me? And we've only been working together for 2 months, and he's not even the same person. And he's like, I didn't believe you at the beginning that you could help me fast, but I believe now. And the only reason why he believes now is because I'm showing him an aspect to him he's never seen. And once you see it, you find all the truth. And that's when the transformation happens fast. The reason why people don't get transformations fast is because they don't actually see the truth. And so they can't see the end result beyond that space anyways.
Mm-hmm. And I find with my coaching, and 90% of the time, obviously the people have the answer themselves. They just need somebody else to help them get there, and just to be that objective person that will listen and ask them tough questions rather than their partner or best friend who'll shy away from that. And that's as much there is magic related to coaching and a lot of interesting approaches. Sometimes it can be very simple, and you just need to hold people accountable. So I think I totally agree with you there. Just interested in goal setting, and I know one of your goals is to have impacted 1 million clients, I guess, by 2025. Was that something I saw on your website?
Impact 1 million entrepreneurs by 2025.
Yeah. So it's a lofty goal, right? So how do you come up with goals? That's obviously great to have high aspirational goals, but even for the shorter term ones, how do you set goals? What's your approach for that? And how do you kind of measure your progress along?
That's a really good question. So the first thing I do is I don't actually use the term goals. Most people have a negative connotation and understanding of goals in their subconscious mind, which actually creates more resistance to people accomplishing goals. So I call them intentions. A lot of my content will use the term goals because people resonate, but they're actually intentions. And so I actually intend to impact 1 million entrepreneurs by 2025. And so when you intend to do something, things become a little bit different. So I work backwards. Okay, if I'm going to impact 1 million people by 2025, what does that look like? What has to happen? And I begin to work backwards on if that's going to happen by 2025, what has to happen in 2024? What has to happen in 2023? What has to happen in 2022? And we work backwards and kind of see what those numbers look like. Obviously, subjective to like the compound effect or anything like that. But then what I do is I'm like, okay, how many people can I impact this month that will help me give me the ripple effect of impacting that many more entrepreneurs? Because it's not necessarily clients I need, it's the impact of entrepreneurs. So that could be someone that comes, listens to a podcast of mine and is radically transforms beyond that place. That would be somebody that I impact. So every month, I'm making sure my podcast is growing, my audience is growing, the people that are downloading and opting into my stuff is growing. And most people will have a certain number. I have a certain number of a bottom number. I have to be growing by a certain amount every month. I'm not looking for the top number. I'm looking for the bottom. Once I hit the bottom, I've hit it. If I go past it, that's great. But every month I'm looking at it. I have analytics coming to me every Friday. The bottom line for me in terms of those intentions or goals, am I taking daily and perfect action every day that's moving me closer towards that? Whether that's a podcast episode, a content piece, a connection request, something. Am I doing that every day? Because if I do that every day, I know by the laws of the universe, I will have impacted that many people because that's how law of reciprocity works. That's how law of attraction works. And so that's how I build my goals and my intentions. It's a very energetic base. And just, am I taking action every day? Because if I am, then the universe will give me what I desire because that's how it works.
Yeah, interesting. And it's very analytical. It's very, data driven in a way, right? That, not you, but when I talk to coaches and, they might have very lofty aspirational goals of doing, changing the world and putting a dent in the universe and all of those sort of things. And you have a number and a date, right? And that's, in my background of project management, that is a kind of a SMART goal, they would term it, right? That it's specific and measurable and achievable, all of that stuff. So, and it's nice to see that there's logic as well as, passion. Both of those things kind of work together well sometimes. So that's quite interesting to hear. Just on peak performance, then, what are the aspects of peak performance? You've called out peak performance as a key. Maybe just give me some kind of characteristics of that and how you help people reach that. So
those are the different aspects of us as entrepreneurs. And when I talk about peak performance, it's about aligning that aspect of your business, how you operate meetings, how you work with clients, how you are the CEO, how that aspect of you internally is actually aligned with the human aspect to you. So, for instance, you decide that you want to show up as an entrepreneur and you want to have peak performance in outreach, in your sales strategy. You want to become one of the best within what you do for sales. In order for you to become peak performance in sales within your organization, your mental mind, your beliefs, thoughts, and stories need to be in alignment with your higher self, what you truly desire, not what everyone else wants, not what the universe is telling you or what society is telling you, what you really want. And then, are you, the human self, actually in alignment with the inner self now? Are the actions and the way that you're showing up externally showing up internally? So you want to become the best at sales. Is internally your belief system believing that you are, or is it in lack? Are you in unworthiness? Do you not believe you can have it? So when we talk about peak performance, it's about getting your inner self, your higher self, your conscious self into alignment with your human self, your ego self. And most of the time, those two are not connected instantly because that's the behaviors of the ego. So if you want to get into peak performance, you need the two of them to synergistically work together. And what I do is I help entrepreneurs correct the inner work that becomes them into alignment with their human self, which allows them to optimize at a really high state with no resistance, and there's flow and there's ease, and it's exactly what they want. And it's just fun. And so that's how I help people get into peak performance. And it's in every aspect of our life because we have performance in all areas.
Interested to think, though, when you help certain clients to get there, that by going through that internal check-in and figuring out their ego, how often do they realize I'm doing actually the wrong job here? This is not what I actually want to be, and they want to take a right turn or a complete 180. Have you seen that, and is that something that pops up regularly?
All the time. It's probably like close to 85%. I was talking to a guy yesterday who's got a successful business and he's had it for years, but he's the bottleneck in his business, and he's not having peak performance in his outreach because he feels like he's the only one that can do it properly. And so instead of outsourcing and hiring a team to help him, he's got a belief that only he can do it. So I have to help him correct that belief because he's not in peak performance living within that belief. And so once you help someone correct that, then they can move beyond it. But at the beginning, he didn't see that. He didn't see that being a problem. He thought it was everybody else. It's like, no, actually that belief that you hold to be true about that is the reason why you're stuck.
Yeah, you're doing yourself out of business sometimes in that scenario, but obviously they want to stay with you then to go in a different path, in a different direction, and probably be even more successful because they're going to be working towards something. Like, that's the thing. If they're successful, even if they're, in spite of not being passionate about it, imagine how successful they can be if they're aligned to whatever they're trying to do,
Yeah, I don't lose a lot of clients. A lot of clients stick around because every new level we move into in life in general, there's a new aspect of our subconscious that arrives that we have to work through. And so it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire, you still have internal challenges that you have to work through. That's the point of life, is growth and ascension. And so we can't ever escape that reality.
Mm-hmm. How do you find clients now? Because we talk about subconscious a lot. You obviously infuse soul and are influenced by Buddhism and higher self and ego. That can make people a little bit uncomfortable, I would imagine, a bit scared. It's a bit woo-woo and not, aligned to the hard-nosed, numbers of what business is about. How do they, I suppose, drop their guard, and how do you approach kind of getting them a little bit more open and potentially vulnerable, perhaps?
I hold a belief to be true that I actually don't attract those type of people, and the people that I work with are ready for me. And those are the people that I attract. When we want to talk about subconscious and energy, I believe that to be true. And so if someone comes across my profile and it's a little too woo-woo or anything, they actually naturally repel themselves because I also hold that belief to be true. I don't have conversations trying to convince people about this. They're more curious because they're ready for it. So it's a little bit of a different situation, but I created it to be that way.
Mm-hmm. So you don't do any hard selling. Effectively, when somebody comes to you, they're ready, and off you go, and that makes it a lot simpler, right? You don't have to, you don't have to put extra effort in, which probably ultimately is probably wasted effort, I would imagine.
Anyone who's trying to do a hard sell is out of alignment right there. If you're trying to do a hard sell, your belief system internally is out of alignment. No sale should ever feel hard. It's what you believe to be true.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, is that like a Gary V? I followed him a few years ago. I haven't kept up with all of that stuff. I just don't. Not that I don't have time, but just some stuff. Some I buy into, and others it's almost too much. There's too much information thrown at you. In some ways, I think I've blocked out certain folks like that completely. So I just don't see them on feed anymore. But do you get selective on what you pick up? How do you kind of filter out a lot of, not just him, but others that what's important and what's not?
It's funny that you say that because as I say, I've listened to Gary Vaynerchuk. What I didn't mention was that I turned Gary Vaynerchuk off when I started my business because that was his advice. Take the information and run with it. Most people aren't. You're going to keep listening and you're not going to do anything about it. So I actually shut everybody out, and I really don't have a lot of people in my world. Unless there's something I'm struggling with and I need that expertise, I'll tap into it at that time. But once I've gotten what I need, I don't stick around. I have a newsfeed eradicator on my Facebook feed. I have certain boundaries around when I'm on social media. So I'm very cognizant of what I have going on inside of like what I'm listening to. So I think a lot of people have to be conscious of that for themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I started podcasting 4 or so years ago, I had influencers that inspired me to do it. But then as I started, I literally stopped listening to all of those. And anytime I listen to them now, I don't connect with them anymore. And part of that was conscious because I didn't want to be influenced by them, even subconsciously, that I'd end up talking about the content and it's just regurgitating what other people said. And other parts just you naturally kind of over time move away from some people and are influenced by others, So have you found something similar when you've started your own podcast and you're kind of going your own path with that as well?
Totally. And actually people think it's crazy when they ask me like, well, who are the people that you listen to and look up to? And I'm like, nobody. I don't have time. I got to stay in my own lane. I got to be focused, So yeah, I mean, I turn people out. I turn people on when I need them and I turn them off when I don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that's definitely, I think, a good approach. Just interested, I know we're coming up near time on it, and it was fascinating to hear your journey so far, and it sounds like, things are going well. And your podcast, then, just talk a little bit about the episodes and what you kind of put out in that. And do you do interviews as well, or is it predominantly solo stuff?
Yeah, so my podcast is predominantly solo stuff. I do interviews. When I started my podcast, I did run a series called Inspirational Interviews. But my podcast is really mindset and entrepreneurship and spirituality based. And what it actually became for me was the safest place that I had to share my content in the most authentic, vulnerable way. And so my content on my podcast is very raw and very real. It's also about my own personal journey and the mindset challenges I experienced as an entrepreneur and how I navigated them and what I was experiencing. But the podcast is really there to help people, one, understand mindset on a deeper level, two, start to understand the woo spiritual stuff that, people are seemingly afraid of or aren't ready for. And then the third one is obviously to be in the entrepreneurship and to see what it's actually like and how someone as an entrepreneur navigates those mindset challenges for themselves. So that's what my podcast is about. I release an episode every Tuesday. There's about 113 episodes. There is value in every single one of them. I give an exercise or a tip or something in every single one. And if somebody were to go through and listen to all of my episodes, they would actually radically transform their life because it's all of my content and information for free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, sounds great. And I, as always, will include links to your website and how people can listen in. As the name of this show is 1% Better, you've given away some very useful tips. Whether people take action on them, that's their decision. Is there anything else that one or two more little bits of really useful, easy, quick kind of hacks that people can apply to get them out of the funk that they're in, or a state that they're in, or just a simple shift in mindset?
A really good one is, this is a tactic that Mel Robbins kind of uses, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. But I call it the let it go method. When you find your mindset attaching to a past story or a negative belief and you don't really want to go there and you're aware of it and you're like, I don't really want to go down that way. If you just simply repeat to yourself, let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go 5 times, the odds of you no longer actually attaching to that experience and actually letting it go are very high. Most people don't do that. So in a moment where you're feeling stress come up or anxiety, let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. That gives enough for your feedback loop to switch gears and go to something different, which is hopefully something more positive. So that's something that people can use in an experience where they're feeling very, very isolated, very stressed in a one-off situation. Mm-hmm. The other really one piece of advice I would give that not enough people put time into is forgiveness. And forgiveness is actually an energetic vibration that's very low vibration. And when we hold on to anything that is resentment or hate or negativity or anything towards other people or ourselves, more specifically, we can't ever achieve our peak potential or align with our higher self. And so I want to always encourage people to look at their forgiveness of their life. Like, do you need to forgive yourself? Maybe you're being too hard on yourself. Maybe you need to forgive your mom for that thing that she did that you're still holding on to. Because if you want to get 1% better in your life, you can't get 1%er with that dead weight on the bottom of you. And that's the reality of it. And so if people spent more time there, they would see that more aspects of their life would actually improve because it's such a low vibrational energetic state that it just holds you down and it really holds people back from getting what they want. And so I really empower people to look into that for themselves.
Mm-hmm. And you just tapped into vibrations, and that's a low one. Give me examples of just one or two more around vibration, because it's just an interesting angle maybe to wrap up on.
Cool. I'd love to. So different vibrations. I mean, happiness and love is a very high vibrational. Anxiety and depression and negativity are very low vibrational. Feeling sense of accomplishment are a little bit higher vibrational aspects as well. But basically what they are, they're the states that we feel, right? So when we feel anxious and we feel that, it's an energetic state that we're within. And it's super low vibration, which is why there's such a trigger emotionally inside of us. When you're happy, it's the opposite, right? You're super happy. Everything's feeling better. The energy is lighter at that state. It's moving faster. It's easier to get to you. And so it's a place that people want to be in, but it's kind of the short form version of energetic states and frequencies.
Do you talk about that on your show? Have you kind of done episodes around vibrations?
I have done a few episodes on the podcast, yes, around energy and vibration and dimensions and all of that stuff. Yep.
Okay. Well, maybe that's a good way to end it and point people to one of those episodes, because I think they're fascinating ideas and facts, I suppose, science-backed stuff. So definitely check that out. Danielle, that's great. Give a shout out to your website, how folks can get to it, and anything else you want to share before we go.
Yeah, so people can reach me at yourmindsetmentor.com. My podcast is at themindvibe.show. And I'm on LinkedIn primarily. So I'd love to connect with you. Anyone who's listening to this, reach out, connect, send me a message. Let me know that you heard this podcast. And I'd love to get to know you guys a little bit more.
Very good. You might get a few new Irish and European listeners. Why not spread it globally? Hopefully something comes out of it. And again, it was lovely to chat to you tonight or today or your afternoon, Danielle. And best of luck with all the work you're doing. I'm sure you'll continue to be successful.
Thank you, Rob. It's been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you having me on the show.
It's great to have you. Thanks a lot. Hey folks, thanks so much for listening to the show. If you enjoyed it, could you please consider helping me extend the reach of the podcast that a little bit further? You can do that in a number of ways. The number one way is to subscribe on your app of choice. This helps me with the chart ranking, leading to more folks stumbling across the podcast and checking it out. You could also repost it on your social media channels. Any of them would be great. And maybe even tell a friend in person or over the phone. Pick up the phone, give them a call and tell them about the 1% Better podcast. Tell them about this episode or one that you've heard in the past. Any will do. I would really appreciate it. In the last year, we set up a 1% Better Slack community, which you can join for free and interact with me and other members of the community and improve through holding each other accountable and sharing monthly challenges. It's a lot of fun. Check it out. I'm into season 4 of this incredible journey, and the more of these interviews and solo shows that I research, record and share, the better I believe that they get, and more loaded with actionable takeaways that you can learn from. I know I've learned so much from it so far, and it's always really, really fulfilling and rewarding when I hear from you on what you took from it. So do reach out, rob@robofthegreen.ie. And of everybody that listens, 90% listen and enjoy, but only around 10% actually take action, write down takeaways and put them into practice. I am convinced that if we can move that number a bit higher, the listeners will not only make steps forward towards their goals, but they will be more fulfilled and happy and better. Change doesn't happen overnight. It is hard, but it's all about taking the first step, whatever that is for you. You can absolutely do this. Make a plan, be deliberate, take action. Don't overreach. Start with those small incremental improvements, and over time you will see great progress. It's all in the pursuit of betterness. So again, thank you so much for listening. Good luck and stay safe.